Okay, ready? Okay. The time is now 5:30 on November 18th, 2020, and this public meeting of the State Board of Education will come to order. This meeting of the State Board is being held virtually to protect residents' health during this public health emergency. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Present.
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
President Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. O'Leary.
Here.
Mr. Parker.
Present.
Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams. Mr. Batchelor. Mr. Batchelor. Ms. McClay.
Present.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Present.
Ms. Dell. Ms. Dell. Madam President, you have quorum.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined. We will proceed to the business portion of the meeting now. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there changes? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. The motion being properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is approved. Members, we also have in front of us the minutes from our November 4th working session. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Second. I think Emily seconded it even though she's on mute.
Second.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, the motion is approved. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ruth Wattenberg. I'm the Ward 3 representative and president of the DC State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the DC Board, I welcome our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, November 18th public meeting. Our next official meeting of the State Board is our working session on December 2nd. The video for this meeting will be posted on our YouTube page at DC SBOE and rebroadcast on the Knowledge Network as soon as it is available. Tonight, we will hear from a number of public witnesses. We will also discuss the impact of the pandemic school closures on special education in particular. District schools are required by federal and local law to provide special education services to students if they need them. But how is that being done in a virtual environment? What are the ways that schools and parents are meeting the students' needs at home? How do we ensure that the services continue no matter how a school operates, virtually or in person? What services are more easily provided virtually and which most depend on being in person? The panel will help the board and the public better understand what is going on now in terms of special ed and what we can do better as a city for our students with special needs. Before we get to that discussion, however, we will be considering 4 ceremonial resolutions, which are used by the State Board to recognize important people and dates. Tonight, we'll be honoring National Homeless Youth Awareness Month, our nation's veterans and military families, education support professionals, and the district's 2020 Teacher of the Year, Alejandro Diasgranados. Now I'm going to turn to the interim state superintendent, Shauna Young, for any opening statements that she has tonight.
Thank you, President Wattenberg. And thanks for the opportunity to join you again today. Over the past several months, OSSE has been working with the State Board of Education on 2 very important projects, approving regulations pertaining to attendance collection and updating our social studies standards. After several months of taking questions on the proposed attendance regulation, we will be seeking a vote on a resolution to approve them next month. We were also pleased to present at the most recent Social Studies Task Force on the steps that we will be taking to establish our writing committee for social studies standards early next year. It's always helpful to get the board's feedback on these issues, and we look forward to action on attendance and seeing the guiding principles for the social studies standards very soon. This evening, the board will be considering several ceremonial resolutions. OSSE stands with the board to recognize our veterans and military families for the sacrifices they make for our country. In addition, our education support staff, transportation workers, health providers, custodians, cafeteria workers, and others are unsung heroes in our schools every day. They make sure that our schools are ready for students to learn, and they provide critical services to our students to support their growth and development. On October 15th, OSSE announced that Alejandro Diasgranados from Ayton Elementary School was the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year. We are proud of his accomplishments and his efforts to improve student outcomes, including school climate. It is fitting that the board honors him with a ceremonial resolution this evening. We would also like to recognize our other finalists for DC Teacher of the Year as well. Lauren McKenzie, a social studies teacher at Ron Brown College Preparatory High School, and Shalina Warren, a social studies teacher at Dunbar High School. We're also pleased that the board continues to draw attention to the needs of our students experiencing homelessness. OSSE provides training and support to schools, shelters, and community members to increase awareness on this issue and to ensure that the rights of homeless students to continue their education is upheld. In fact, we were pleased to learn that our own homeless education state coordinator, Nicole Lee Wanda, was named State Coordinator of the Year by the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth, and we're proud of her service to our students. Finally, the board will conduct a panel on the needs of special education students during the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of COVID-19 and the uncertainty we all face is stressful, to say the least. Families have had lots of questions and concerns regarding educational services for students with disabilities, and OSSE cares about and is committed to helping families get important and reliable information. We hope that the public will use our special education resource hub that is located on our website that contains a wealth of information customized for families. In addition, OSSE continues to support and monitor LEAs as they meet the needs of students with disabilities in accordance with the Individuals for Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. OSSE has written extensive guidance and process documents on the steps LEAs have taken to ensure that they satisfy these legal obligations during the ongoing pandemic and through distance learning. And we hope that you can use those as a reference as well. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Young. Our first ceremonial resolution is CR 2017 National Homeless Youth Awareness Month recognition. Is there a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Hayworth, could you read the resolution?
Let me try this one more time, unmuted. State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution, National Homeless Youth Awareness Month, CR 20-17. Whereas the United States observes National Homeless Youth Awareness Month each year from November 1st through November 30th. Whereas National Homeless Youth Awareness Month was declared in 2007 to raise awareness of the problems faced by youth, families, and individuals at risk of or experiencing homelessness and educating the public on ways to end homelessness. Whereas National Homeless Youth Awareness Month also holds National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week from November 15th to November 22nd. Whereas a person experiencing homelessness is an individual who lacks fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, or an individual who is doubled up, meaning they are staying with friends and family out of necessity. Whereas the Office of the State Superintendent of Education reported that 7,728 children and youth have experienced homelessness in the district during the 2018 to 2019 school year. Whereas the actual number of youth experiencing homelessness may be higher than what it is reported in official district records and the 2020 census because of the challenges in enumerating a large, hard-to-count population. Whereas youth experiencing homelessness face an increased risk of contracting COVID-19 because of the difficulties in maintaining social distancing and other recommended practices when living in shelters. Whereas the Department of Human Services, particularly Youth Homeless Services and Youth Hope, which is available to youth 24 years or younger, provide outreach resources like food and clothing, housing, and emergency shelters, services like laundry, showers, and case management, a runaway and homeless youth hotline, and prevention education to support youth experiencing homelessness. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes National Homeless Youth Awareness Month and values the importance of the district's youth and homeless services, youth empowerment programs, and homeless shelters as critical supports for youth experiencing homelessness.
Thank you. Having been read into the record, is there any discussion on the resolution?
Madam President, I would briefly just say I am heartened that we as a body are continuing to keep the youth that are experiencing homelessness front and center. Last year, I recall we had a conversation where we were highlighting the need for transportation services for many of our homeless youth. And as our resolution states, we know that many of our youth experiencing homelessness are having a very hard time during COVID, not having the resources and primarily the support needed during this difficult time. So I look forward to working with our partners at OSSI and our sister offices to continue to keep this issue front and center. But I'm again heartened that we are taking this opportunity to recognize such a valuable student body here in the city.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to speak? Dr. O'Leary, if you are talking, you're on mute.
I think we need to make sure that, especially since some of the schools open today, that we need to make sure that we keep the pedal to the metal to make sure that the system takes care of those students who don't live at home.
Thank you. Okay. All those in, Mr. Hayworth, will you call the roll? Seeing no further discussion.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams. Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. McClay.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Dell.
Aye.
President Wattenberg.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The resolution is approved. Our second ceremonial resolution is CR 2018, honoring America's veterans and military families. Is there a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Hayworth?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution honoring America's veterans and military families, CR 20-18. Whereas Veterans Day is a celebration to honor America's veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. Whereas the United States observes Veterans Day each year on November 11th, regardless of what day of the week on which it falls, in order to preserve the historical significance of the date. Whereas November 11th, 1918 was largely considered the end of the war to end all wars and dubbed Armistice Day. And in June 1926, the US Congress officially recognized the date at the end of World War I. And in May 1938, Veterans Day became an official holiday. Whereas November was first declared Military Family Month in 1996 and has since been a time to acknowledge the tremendous sacrifices our military families make. Whereas in October 2001, the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs was created to provide veterans benefits, assistance, information outreach, effective advocacy, claims processing assistance, and service provider coordination to veterans and their families. Whereas more than 30,000 District of Columbia residents are veterans, and whereas 9 Army and 2 Navy Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps programs are currently operating within District of Columbia Public Schools, with many students honoring soldiers with the district in Arlington Cemetery. Within the district in Arlington Cemetery. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and celebrates Veterans Day and the contributions and sacrifice of the district's veterans and their families, as well as all current military families, especially those with students in our schools. Madam President, you're on mute.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution? Ms. McClay?
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad to be introducing and speaking on this resolution today. I'm the proud granddaughter of a veteran who was served in World War II, and he spent the rest of his career afterwards helping to create the Air Force and work at Andrews Air Force Base. Because of this, I've had the privilege of learning from veterans and my own family members throughout my life, seeing the commitment and sacrifice that goes into loving and serving our country so we can continue to be the land of the free. As important, but if not more importantly, I especially want to mention and recognize our military families in the district and their contributions to our city. Military families, they know the meaning of service. And I think sometimes they know the meaning of service well and more beyond those who are actually serving in the military, those more than so than veterans. This year may have been challenging for all, but military families know the meaning of challenge day in and day out, and they sacrifice for all of us. That's why I'm proud that DC has helped to provide education that supports our military families and the diverse choices that they make. I'm proud that we acknowledge the students who live on base, and over the course of my term in office, we've even opened a new charter school on base that caters specifically to these students and the obstacles they incur. I want to make sure that we continue to support our military families and our students who participate in military programs such as ROTC and Junior ROTC and their unique situations every day and every year. Thank you to all of our veterans in the district and our military families.
I would just like to acknowledge our own veteran, Dr. Fraser O'Leary, our Board of Ed rep from Ward 4, who is also a many year rep, many year veteran of DC Public Schools, mainly at Cardozo. And really, Fraser, it's great to have you on the board. And I think you bring to the board some of the wisdom and values from that experience so many years ago. So we really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Mr. Jacobson. And actually, Mr. O'Leary, do you want to say anything before I go on to our next person?
No, you said it all.
All right, Mr. Jacobson.
And I echo our president's comments about Dr. O'Leary and your service. And just want to give a shout out to my husband, who's working late at the hospital, who retired last year as a major in the United States Air Force. And then my heart and love goes out to all of our veterans in town and our military families. Thank you.
Before I move on, I should also acknowledge I actually am an Air Force brat. And so I should also acknowledge my father, who was a veteran in the Air Force. So, Dad.
President. Very quickly, I just wanted to say, as the son and nephew of Army veterans, I wanted to wish everybody a belated happy Veterans Day. But likewise, also just wanted to give a shout out to some of the Ward 8 organizations that are really serving our veterans and military families, namely schools like Lecky Elementary that are serving our students on Joint Base Anacostia Bowling here in Ward 8, as well as so many of our adult education programs that are really giving veterans a new opportunity to break into the workforce and learn new skills as they come home and look to be better supported and better equipped for life here at home. And I'm thinking of obviously our state programs, but also schools like CC Prep and Academy of Hope that do so much work to provide quality adult education for our adults, and so many of them veterans. So thanks so much, and thank you for taking the time to pass this resolution.
Any further discussion? We will move to a vote. Mr. Hayworth, call the roll, please.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary. Dr. O'Leary, you're on mute.
You must have put me on mute. Aye.
Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker, you're on mute.
Aye.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. McClay.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan. Ms. Dell.
Aye.
Madam President,
Aye.
the resolution passes unanimously. Madam President, you're on mute.
I think we had been all doing so well for so many meetings now, and I feel like we're really falling down, but I will try better. Maybe be a model. All right. Our third resolution is CR 2019, Education Support Professionals Recognition. Is there a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Hayworth, please read the resolution.
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution, National Education Support Professionals Day, CR 20-19. Whereas National Education Support Professionals Day is a celebration to honor the contributions of school support employees who serve as dedicated and committed partners in keeping schools running while advocating for and facilitating the health, safety, achievement, happiness, and developmental growth of students in pre-K-12 and higher education institutions. Whereas education support professionals include bus drivers and other transportation workers, school secretaries, health and student service workers, custodial and maintenance workers, cafeteria personnel, paraprofessionals, technology specialists, and skilled trade workers. Whereas Education Support Professionals Day is annually observed on November 18th, the Wednesday of American Education Week. Whereas the National Education Association's Representative Assembly established Education Support Professionals Day in 1987, whereas there are approximately 5,100 education support professionals in the district's public elementary and secondary schools. Whereas this year's Standing Ovation Awards for DCPS Staff Member of the Year went to Brandon Williams, who served for 20 years as Thompson Elementary School's custodial foreman, and who acted as a mentor and motivator to students, making all students feel welcome and respected at the school. And whereas this year's Rubenstein Award for highly effective support staff in the district went to Jermaine Wyatt, a social worker at Excel Academy, Angela Wright, an administrative assistant at Patterson Elementary School, Julian Hipkins III, a global studies coordinator at Roosevelt High School, and Robert Gillespie, a foreman at Turner Elementary School. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and celebrates National Education Support Professionals Day and the thousands of education support professionals in the district who make invaluable contributions to their communities, schools, and the students they serve.
Thank you. Any discussion on the resolution? Dr. O'Leary and then Dr. Gasoi.
One thing that if everyone didn't know it before the pandemic began, and especially in the last couple of weeks when some of the schools were getting ready to open, that our system could not survive without the people outside of the classrooms. And the fact that all of the schools are ready to open physically says so much for what the educational professionals besides teachers do in the buildings every day.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. I was going to say something very similar, and I was thinking back to when I worked at Mission Hill in Boston, and I was thinking of our office assistant who was, I just felt like she held up the school. You know, she was the one that we would send students to if they were sick, if they needed to call home, if they needed to break up a fight. She knew absolutely everybody's name. She knew every parent's name. And I think that our support staff, not just the folks who work in the office, but all of the support staff in schools are often, they're essential, and they're often the unsung I would say, heroes and just the everyday folks who keep things running, as Dr. O'Leary mentioned. I also just want to say that I am hopeful that the fact that DCPS decided to go back on the decision to reassign a lot of support staff during the reopening in phase 2 is a sign that that's sort of a recognition of how important these staff are to their schools, and that it would be very disruptive to move them involuntarily. So I just want to say I'm really glad we're introducing this resolution.
Thank you. If there's no other, Mr. Hayworth, could you call Dr. Sutter?
Sorry, I did the participant hand raise. I just want to add to everything that folks have said, but note that as I made my rounds of schools in Ward 6 the past couple of months, particularly to get feedback on social studies standards and handing out flyers, the folks in our buildings every day for the past few months have been our school support staff. So I just want to thank those folks who have been coming into work during this time and being there to support our families with picking up supplies for virtual learning, to be there for teachers who need to come into the building to access their supplies, to be there for meal pickup, to be there for all the things that still happen as part of school during this time of COVID. So sincere thanks to all of those folks for the work they've been doing every day.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for missing you. I've now turned on my participant list, so hopefully if people put their hands up, I'll see them, but otherwise just go like that. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Hayworth, could you call the roll?
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Dr. Jacobson.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary. Dr. O'Leary, you're on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. That time it wasn't me. Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. McClay.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Dell.
Aye.
The resolution passes unanimously.
I didn't get to vote.
Oh, sorry. President Wattenberg.
I'm for it. Aye.
Now it's totally unanimous.
Thank you all. Our final ceremonial resolution is CR 2020, recognizing Alejandro Diasgranados as the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year. I'm pleased to note that Mr. Diasgranados is with us tonight, and he's going to offer a few comments after we adopt our resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Hayworth?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing Alejandro Diasgranados as 2021 DC Teacher of the Year. Whereas the Office of the State Superintendent of Education has awarded the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year award to a bold and dedicated educator, Alejandro Diasgranados, a 4th and 5th grade English language arts and social studies teacher at DC Public Schools' Ayton Elementary School in Ward 7. Whereas Mr. Diasgranados was raised in Prince George's County, Maryland, holds a bachelor's degree in health sciences from Virginia State University and a master's degree in elementary education and teaching from Johns Hopkins University School of Education. Whereas Mr. Diasgranados, known as Mr. Diaz to his students, made college a theme for his 3rd and 4th grade classroom and named his reading groups after prestigious universities and raised money for 40 of his students to attend his graduation at Johns Hopkins University. Whereas Mr. Diasgranados, a Teach for America alumni, came to Ayton Elementary School in 2015, discovering a passion for and dedication to the field of education. Whereas Mr. Diasgranados empowers his students to lead and learn in the classroom, igniting their empathy and passion to advocate for others, for themselves, and to develop the skills they need to excel in elementary school and beyond. And whereas Mr. Diasgranados was awarded the 2020 Stanford Teacher Award, which granted him $10,000, describing him as an educator who, quote, is an exceptionally inspiring teacher because of his dedication and commitment to go above and beyond for his students. Now therefore be it resolved that the District of Columbia State Board of Education honors the commitment and inspiration that Mr. Alejandro Diasgranados provides every day to the students, staff, and community of Ayton Elementary School and the District of Columbia.
Thank you very much. Is there discussion on the resolution?
I would like to just say thank you so much for all that you do. Of course, we always, every day, every year, need amazing teachers, but now more than ever, we know that our students really need the support, the inspiration, and the consistency that we know that you are giving them. So I just want to applaud you and congratulate you. Thank you so much.
I saw Mr. Parker and then Dr. Sutter.
I'll be quick. Mr. Diaz, I will take the liberty to call you that, as I heard in the resolution. I just want to commend you. It's not easy being a teacher, as many of us here tonight can attest. And it's certainly not easy to be an award-winning teacher, especially given everything that is going on now and the challenges that many of our students face. I think being a male teacher of color adds to the significance of your award. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that you're a TFA alum. I'm also a very proud TFA alum. And if I had to plug, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last 3 Teachers of the Year in DC have been TFA alums. And so I do think there's something in the water there. I would extend this invite. This past year, my colleagues, Dr. Sutter and Dr. Gasoi, extended resolutions encouraging more teachers of color, both Black and Latinx, and wanting to find ways to keep more teachers of color generally in the classroom. And I would take the liberty to say male teachers of color. And so I just would love to extend the opportunity to learn from you what's keeping you in the classroom and doing it so well, and hopefully to thought partner on ways that we can get more teachers like you to stay in the classroom, but also to drive impact as you're clearly doing. So again, congrats and thanks for being here tonight.
Mr. Diaz, we're just delighted to get to honor you tonight. Congratulations on winning Teacher of the Year. I'm also especially excited that it is an elementary social studies and language arts teacher who was given this honor this year. As chairperson of our social studies committee, and a former social studies teacher myself, this is incredibly important for our all young people, but especially our elementary school students, to get both exposed to and inspired by social studies education. So I am delighted that you've been given this honor and so glad you're here tonight. And I look forward to hearing from you in a few minutes.
Madam President, you're on mute.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, we can call the roll. Did we call the roll?
Not yet. 1 second.
Or do we? Okay.
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobson.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Mr. Batchelor.
Aye.
Ms. McClay.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
Ms. Dell.
Aye.
President Wattenberg.
Aye.
Motion is
Thank you.
approved unanimously.
Thank you. What I was saying while I was on mute is I had lost track whether we had adopted the resolution. We're moving into discussion on it, but whatever. Anyway, Mr. Diasgranados, we are delighted to have you here, delighted at your award, and I turn it over to you for some comments.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm incredibly honored and humbled to be recognized as the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year. I first want to say that I would not be the educator that I am today without my former teachers, coaches, professors, who've always believed in me and challenged me to do better. Growing up in Prince George's County, I had so much support from educators and mentors throughout the school and the community who really helped mold me into the person that I am today. So I definitely thank them for that. I'd also like to recognize every staff member and colleague that I've had the opportunity to collaborate with, including the entire team at Aton Elementary School, from the administration to the teachers and even all the support staff as well. This is such a great honor for the Aton community, the Ward 7 community, and really the entire DC community. So I wouldn't have received this without, my community support. And most importantly, I want to thank the wonderful students and families that I get to serve every single day. I've learned something from every single student that I've ever had the opportunity to teach. They are extremely inspiring, and they are really, truly the reason why I do this work. They've taught me so much more that I'll ever teach them, and I'm forever grateful for that. So as the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year representative, I will continue to use my platform to advocate for not only my students, but all students and teachers here in our nation's capital. So thank you once again for this wonderful honor, and I am looking forward to partnering with a lot of you all to, getting some things done, especially Mr. Parker.
Thank you very, very much. All right. We are moving to public comment. At every public meeting, we hear testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Tonight, we have 11 witnesses. We will be holding rounds of 3 minutes per member to talk to our the witnesses. We speak for 3 minutes. When you speak, there will be a timer on the lower right portion of your screen. The timer will display how long you have been speaking, and Mr. Hayworth will signal when there are 30 seconds left by sharing a timer. Following each group of witnesses, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 3 minutes each for questions after each panel, and that includes a question and comment and answer. Mr. Hayworth will call the witnesses as well as the question period, and he will mute witnesses or board members that exceed their allotted time. Mr. Hayworth, you may begin by introducing our first panel.
Thank you, Madam President. Our first panel will be beginning with Ms. Derrendinger. And feel free to go ahead and start, and I'll keep admitting the people from the list as we're talking.
All right, thank you. You can hear me? Thank you sincerely to the State Board of Education members for all of your work, the hours that you invest in your continued perseverance and support for the community. I am a mother of 4 children in DC, a volunteer member of the DC Coalition on Equitable Outdoor Education, and a volunteer member of the National Screen Time Action Network Screens in Schools Working Group. I have no conflict of interest, financial or otherwise, in what I speak about tonight. Before being a full-time mother, I worked as a nurse overseas with Doctors Without Borders in violent conflict regions, providing emergency healthcare and control of disease outbreaks. All of my work took place outside, from cold winters in Kosovo to the steamy heat of Sudan and DR Congo. The DC Coalition on Equitable Outdoor Education formed in June with members in every ward of the city seeking to support schools to orient to outdoor learning as a healthy and effective way to have in-person learning during the pandemic. Benefits of outdoor learning are well documented, and we see some of these actually happening right now in DC. 2 weeks ago in Ward 8, Oxen Run Park, there was an in-person outdoor science class, and it was very joyful for children. Topics covered included biology, anatomy of birds of prey, the physics of flight, art, and an opportunity for children to see a live falcon. Tomorrow, children will join an outdoor in-person story time in Oxen Run Park, supported by Friends of Oxen Run and the DC Public Library. This event offers the benefits of outdoor learning alongside the benefits of reading books aloud. Reading real books out loud in person, such as at story time events like this one, have been shown to significantly promote positive brain development in children and teens. Independent research also shows reading skills decline with the use of electronic screens. Furthermore, independent research not industry funded, shows that when even data that has been replicated to verify results suggests that increased computer use, even for purported education reasons, leads to an overall decline in learning. This is difficult information to hear because the marketing from for-profit manufacturers of tablets, laptops, and online platforms has convinced many that computers are a solution. Research shows heavy computer use in schools leads to worse learning outcomes is conclusive. And while some research shows actual physical harm caused by these devices is not conclusive, there's enough research to apply the precautionary principle. When we know there might be some harm, we stop and evaluate for safety to prove the product is safe before continuing to expose our children. MRI brain scans now in children suggest structural brain changes are associated with electronic screen exposure. This research is being published in reputable peer-reviewed journals, such as the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. However, we now have a positive opportunity to follow science and create success for our children by taking advantage of outdoor learning opportunities. Please use your platform as elected officials to ask the DC government to provide $4 million to fund outdoor learning activities for DC schools and community groups that would like to opt in and give this a try. It's imperative to encourage investments in outdoor learning as this is informed by science. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Postels?
Can you hear me? Okay, hi, I'm Doug Postels. I'm a pediatric neurologist, and I am also an epidemiologist and have also an interest on returning children to school. It's informed by my practice here in the district, and I ask students every single time that they come into me, whether for whatever problem it is, how they like school and how they're doing in school. And although I do applaud the school reopening that's beginning, one wonders how we might be able to return children more safely to school. Science, and I'm sure the board is informed by epidemiologists and disease modelers all the time, tells us from a recent study that was published last week in Lancet that when asymptomatic persons enter a schoolroom without masks or physical distancing, the risk of transmission to either teachers or other students is 1 in 200. So that may or may not be acceptable to students, parents, teachers, and the board. But when one moves learning into an outdoor environment, what would that do to the transmission efficiency? There was also a study published last week out of Japan that showed that equivalent activities performed indoors and outdoors decreased transmission risk by an odds of 18.7. That means, of course, that if you attend school inside and if you attend school outside and you do exactly the same thing, you're 18 times less likely to contract coronavirus than if you do equivalent activities inside. So if we take that same infection risk and transmission risk and we move from inside learning to outside learning, we go from a 1 in 200 transmission risk to a 1 in 4,000. So the board needs to think about those numbers and think about that number may be more acceptable to students, parents, and teachers. Certainly, infectious diseases, as we've also shown, have been our great levelers, infecting people from parents all the way to the most vulnerable children. Although the board can't stop the transmission of coronavirus, it can open schools in an intelligent way that is informed by science. My hope is that the board continues its opening activities safely and think about ways such as outdoor learning that may decrease the infection risk for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boston.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to share some comments. if COVID has taught us anything, is that no one individual entity has all the answers. Up until this point, decisions made in education as a result of COVID have been made based on the collective voices of health experts, federal and local officials, elected officials, occasionally families, and some teachers. These decision makers have weighed in on the best way to tackle the shift to remote learning, and recently schools reopening. As a former vocational educator, as well as a parent, this really concerns me, and it begs the question, what about students who also have to endure the inevitable consequences of these decisions? Where's their voice, and who is valuing it? They're the ones inside the classrooms. The science and the evidence has been there for years. The CDC has published the benefits of outdoor education, more recreation, and it seems that the state board, the council, OSCE, everyone has ignored these facts. And yet the academic performance of a lot of students have suffered, particularly those students in Ward 7 and Ward 8. And so, as mentioned, school performance increases, it's healthy. Look at the obesity rate. Does anyone care about that? The stress levels that it would decrease from students as well as teachers. It's fun. That's a huge component with learning, making it fun for students. It instills a sense of civic attitude and behaviors. I would imagine if we had more outdoor learning opportunities, we would probably have less students in ISS. And so when you have resources in a district like the Arboretum, 446 acres, aquatic gardens, it's just no reason not to have this. And so I would ask that this board look to, give students a voice and allow them to express their concerns and advocate for what they think they also may need to change. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing. I appreciate that. Ms. Baum.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, good evening. My name is Maya Baum. I'm a 4th grade teacher in Ward 2. I've been teaching in DC for the past 5 years. I'm here to remind the board about the failings of the STAR system. As we know, the STAR rating is comprised primarily of student test scores from the PARCC test. What this means on the school level is that now the focus of administrations, which means the focus of teachers, is to teach to the test and raise test scores. That type of teaching is not best practice. It is not meaningful learning, and it does not actually help students learn. Rather, it helps students take a test. A study published in the Journal of Mathematics Education in 2018 found, and I quote, that the focus of assessing African-American children via comparison to white children reveals underlying institutionally based racist assumptions about the competencies of African-American students. This is just one of many studies that have similar findings. Standardized testing is racist, classist, ableist, and results in racist teaching and does not accurately capture what students are learning. By using the STAR rating, we have upheld systemic racism in how our schools are run and viewed. What messaging does it send to students and their families that their school is a 1 or 2-star school? How can we expect students to see themselves as learners and have pride in their school if the city is sending the strong message that the school is failing because you as a student are not learning? Your neighborhood, your friends, your family are not good enough, are only 1 or 2 stars. Whereas the neighborhoods of white families and wealthy families are the schools and the learning that is being celebrated. Our students notice these things. Their families notice these things. How can we claim to be a district, a city that values equity when we are using a metric that is not equitable? And when we really think about it, are test scores really what tell us if a school is good? If a child's educational experience is good? I had an African-American male student last year who came into 4th grade saying he hated reading. He would spend reading time looking around the classroom, not even pretending to look at the book. Together, we slowly worked on building his confidence in being a reader. He now loves reading. At the end of last year, his parents told me that when they found out he didn't have to take PARCC, they were so relieved. They watched him in 3rd grade lose his confidence and no longer identify as a learner because of all the test prep his school had to do. Park does not capture that my student is an amazing reader, looking for books that can give him new information about topics he doesn't know. Park does not capture the learning experience my student had. We need a different system that more accurately reflects the types of learning experiences that happen in each school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam President, that ends the first round. Do you want to call questions, or would you like me to? You're on mute, but I'm just going to assume that you said for me to do so. That's perfect. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. I don't really have questions, but I did just want to, first of all, thank you, Ms. Baum, for raising the star rating. As you probably know, the State Board has voted on a resolution already that acknowledges there is bias in the star rating. And we will be taking that up again once we have our new members on board in January to discuss further and gather more input from the public. So thank you for raising it. I wanted to also applaud Mr. Boston for bringing up the need for more student voice, always, right? Yes. And I just want to say that recently Cardozo and Czech students have made clear to me that they would like to have a Ward 1 student forum with also bringing in students from Banneker. So we're going to get that started. So totally agree. And yes, to using the Arboretum and all of the amazing spaces we have in DC. And so I want to say thank you to Ms. Derrendinger for everything you're doing. You are a tireless, industrious, and creative advocate for outdoor learning. I just want to give you a shout out for knitting scores of hats for Bria's outdoor classrooms. I think it was like 40 or something. So, but I just want to say, there's been a trickle of support from our system to, expand outdoor learning for our schools, make that an option. And it really should be a flood at this point, as, science bears out. So that is something that I'm hoping my colleagues on the State Board will be interested in discussing how we can support that advocacy to encourage the council to put funding towards outdoor learning so schools have that as an option to use funding to create outdoor learning spaces. So thank you all for your advocacy.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoi. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you, Mr. Hayworth. Thanks to all of the witnesses for their testimony. Ms. Baum, thank you for your commentary. I will say I remain deeply concerned here in the district that as we talk about reframing the STAR framework, that we don't lose sight of the rationale for having standardized tests for all students published annually, which is to highlight when schools are not adequately serving populations that are struggling to read. I've heard some sobering statistics from not just in DC, but across the country about when we fail to teach reading in a way that all students can learn to read using phonics, et cetera, then we see great disparities in who learns to read. And without annual data that shows that, I fear that we'll go back to a place where some of those students will get lost. So I appreciate your commentary. I know the board will continue to talk about that, but I remain concerned about who we may lose sight of if we lose that testing. Mr. Postels, I want to ask a question of you specifically about outdoor learning. I did some of the tours, the walkthrough tours here in Ward 6 with school leaders, and heard from a few of our union representatives that the teachers were not supportive of outdoor learning as a general population. I want to understand a little bit about places where this is working. If you've heard anything about how that support has been garnered or generated, what kind of information or reassurances can be given to try and get on board the very folks we need to have with us in this work, who are teachers.
Right, which is super important. So I think that from my perspective, so I'm an epidemiologist and a scientist, and I'm an infectious disease expert, and I look at the way that disease is transmitted. And I looked at these numbers because students disliked education, and I thought, well, what are alternatives? And I think, people are smart. And if you can talk to them reasonably about what transmission risk, personal transmission risk is, given different circumstances, hopefully they'll be able to buy in. To me, a 1 in 4,000 chance is low, and worth, bringing children back into an outdoor classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
Yes, I have a couple of short answer tests for Ms. Derrendinger. What happens when weather interferes, especially in our situation now? Like tomorrow, if it starts snowing tonight and you can't go to Oxen Run Park, what can you do?
So my first comment is that I'll say snow, especially in DC, being realistic, if it snows tomorrow, that should not prevent us from going to Oxen Run Park. Every child in Oxen Run Park tomorrow and their caregiver is going to get a hat, a warm wool hat. And the state of Maine, Portland specifically, used their CARES Act money to finance outdoor winter clothing as part of the 156 outdoor classrooms that Portland built out using that money. So when there's weather, there are solutions. There are shelters and tents that can be put in place, not closed with the walls dropped, but just a roof to help people stay dry during precipitation. But the weather forecast for this winter by the Weather Channel actually predicts this is going to be a very mild,
right,
winter, which is in our favor right now.
Okay, thank you. One thing that I'd like to mention that several of you mentioned about the State Board of Education and the concept of us being able to get into the conversation to try to get things going with outdoor learning is that I think the State Board of Education is the only voice that especially in the last 4 months, where there have been conversations about outdoor learning. And that's about all we can do right now. So we will continue to try, and we welcome your presence here. And I know I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Members, I don't see any additional hands or additional comments. President Wattenberg.
Yes, first, quickly to Ms. Baum, I just want to say, proving there's a wide spectrum on our board, I agree with Dr. Sutter on the need to have regular testing, because I think it is really important to understand where students are and what they know and what they haven't learned and don't know. But I agree with what you have said about the way the STAR framework is set up, because that really does create incentives, in my judgment, for too much testing, too much test prep, and so on. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I want to move to the outdoor education, and I am very supportive of this. I know I speak to a lot of parents who feel like if we could do more outdoor education, it would open up a lot of possibilities. So let me, I guess one question, and I'm going to ask everyone to be quick if we can, is to Dr. Derrendinger about how would we spend the $4 million? What kinds of things would that make possible? And then to everybody, I guess, 2 questions. One, are you at all concerned about safety issues being outside? And to Mr. Boston, I see you put there on the chat that it was outdoor issues sometimes that caused, it was out of school issues that sometimes cause students to do poorly in school. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that. So let's start with that. And if there's time, I might go to one more, but.
Okay, real quick, as far as the outside issues, yeah, I mean, the chief being concentrated poverty. And so, some kids are coming to school hungry. Some of them they're bullied, the neighborhoods that they live in. It's a number of things that occur to where students lose interest and just are unable to perform. And so it's just the park testing is just not the best assessment. Again, I know I'm 46. Well, I'll be 46 in January. When I was in school, teachers created tests and grade students. And so why can't we go back to that? And so clearly we need to let teachers teach. test preparation is not learning. And that's just that simple. You know, students are not being prepared for life.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. President Wattenberg, your time has expired. Is there additional questions from members?
Could somebody ask Dr. Derrendinger about how she
Oh,
would,
no, that's fine. You
the
can't
dollars
do
would be spent?
I'm afraid the time for questions has expired unless there are members who have not yet spoken.
I can cede 45 seconds to President Wattenberg.
Ms. Derrendinger, would you like to respond?
Yes. We, in our letter that we wrote to DC Council and the mayor's office asking for the $4 million, suggested that it first go to the priority schools that are the most at need. But in terms of what it could be spent for, there's a wide range. It could be spent for training and onboarding teachers, professional development for how to go outside and teach. It can be spent for warm weather clothing. It could be spent for shelters so that if there is precipitation, there is that mitigating factor, all the way to outdoor bathroom facilities, if that needs to occur, to hand washing facilities. So anything under the roof of outdoor infrastructure is what we wanted that money to be spent for. Again, prioritizing the most at need and at risk parts of the city first for access to that money. But we wanted it to be an easy way, the same way restaurants easily were able to apply for this money as a grant. It was quick and fast and available. And we thought that would make it easier for principals and schools, communities and teachers to actually see there's a true endorsement and will by the government to facilitate these outdoor options.
Thank you very much. Members, that ends the question portion for this panel. Panelists, thank you so much for being here tonight. We do appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and logging off, you're more than welcome to watch the rest of the hearing on YouTube. We very much appreciate you being here. Members, I'm going to be letting in the next panel of witnesses. Give me 1 second. And we're going to be starting with Mr. Tandaric. If you have 3 minutes, feel free to be when you're ready. Mr. Tandaric?
Oh, hi, did you call me?
Yes, sorry. You may have just been still coming in while I was speaking. Feel free to begin. You have 3 minutes.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you so much. Alrighty, good evening, everyone. My name is James Tandaric, and I'm an ESL teacher for Center City Public Charter Schools. I've been teaching the district for 5 years, and I've seen the star rating system turn into a misguided reality for us. I'm here to talk about how the star rating system only pushes schools to unfathomable heights, along with reinforcing segregation in the district. I will also be talking about how we can solve this issue. In my experience, the star rating system has turned into a trophy for schools. At both the schools I have worked at, administration looks at the star rating system as a goal to reach 5 stars. I have been in PDs where I was told we must work hard to reach 5 stars to impress parents and also people in DCPS and DC public charter schools. During a meeting with all the Center City staff, our CEO congratulated one of our schools reaching 5 stars in front of all the other staff. While it is great to acknowledge the work of the school, this will only put pressure on us as teachers to work harder in school. Teachers teach because we want to make sure we want to help our kids grow and develop in front of our eyes. We do not teach for the high test scores, nor for the 5 stars our school may receive. Systemically, we have seen huge correlations that could have big effects for our schools. Many of our 5-star schools are in Ward 3, which has many of our white and middle upper class students, while many of our 1-star schools are in Ward 7 to 8, which has many of our lower class and Black students. If the goal is to provide parents a choice in choosing a school, why would any parent choose a 1-star school? They will only work hard to get into the 5-star school. This never-ending cycle only makes the 5-star schools in Ward 3 more competitive and thus receives more funding, while the schools in Ward 7 to 8 are less competitive and receive little to no funding at all. We must do better to ensure that all of our schools are treated equally and not left to the side because of a simple rating. I have a couple of recommendations that edit this system. One of them is we must eradicate the use of using stars as a way to rate schools. While I understand the intention to make it easy for parents to choose a school, simply putting a rating next to it is not enough and makes schools look like a business. On the other hand, having simple, sufficient data about a school to help parents can be useful. Schools are more complicated than a simple star, and what could be replaced is either a dashboard or one-pager highlighting info about the school. This can include student population, after-school clubs, teacher and principal retention rates, and whether a PTO is active. In addition, the star system does well to provide financial support to their one-star schools. What I offer is to expand the support to our 1- and 2-star schools, as well as make them all have a comprehensive schooling plan. Giving this gives them more resources for the school and is great and should be expanded to ensure schools are supported in future years. We have tried to implement this system as a way to simplify schools, but what it has turned into is a trophy for our schools, and it must be radically changed to ensure all schools are looked at equally while having an objective look for each school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goldstein.
Good evening. First, I just want to congratulate everyone on the recent elections and congratulate the state board for all the positive presence that it's been in working to advance solutions to our education community. It's a disposition that unfortunately hasn't been shared by too many this year. And as we've navigated this crisis, I'm really proud that Empower Ed's teacher leaders have been solutions focused from day one. So as now we reflect on the two great crises that we've really had this year, both the pandemic and the fight for racial justice, our teacher leaders believe that the time was right to step back and explore root causes. The time is right to tackle an issue that undermines both racial equity and the pandemic response fundamentally, mayoral control of schools. We don't tackle this issue lightly. In the hundreds of years of history of DC's education system, there have been dozens of fights to change our education governance system. Many of those fights didn't succeed, and many of them didn't do anything to help students. But having studied our history, we believe this moment is different. It's become increasingly clear that so many in our community that the reason good ideas from those who know the system best, students, parents, teachers, school leaders, community members, don't come to fruition. The reason we spend our time fighting each other rather than serving students is because our system isn't set up to solve problems. It's set up for creating talking points, press conferences, scoring points, claiming credit, even if it means we never get our kids back to school, even if it means we never provide our parents with the childcare relief that they need. So our teacher leaders have embarked on a journey. They're engaged in deep reading on the history of education governance in DC, alternative systems around the country, arguments for and against our current system. They're taking notes, engaging community members, and beginning to envision what reforms would make a difference. We don't believe the solutions will be clear-cut, maintaining our current system or a complete reversal, but we do believe that change is needed. One thing that stood out clearly is that communities where the majority of students are Black and brown, power is taken from the community and placed in the hands of a mayor and political appointees. The history of education governance in DC is a story of distrust in Black leaders in Washington. Nearly every time the education governance structure has shifted from a more centralized approach, historians have noted the executive did so under the guise of financial mismanagement. But nearly every time it has come on the direct heels of Black power being expanded on the school board of trustees, or efforts from minority communities to exert more local control. In 1878, 85, 1916, 1939, in the 1960s, and again in the 2000s. So now as we're in a time enlightened by the idea that racial equity should be a consideration in every area of policy, we must also reflect on how our education governance system has concentrated power in the hands of the few at the expense of the voices of predominantly Black and brown community leaders. So today we want to invite all of you on this board and those in the community, parents, students, teachers, school leaders, to join us for a virtual summit on community voice in DC education on December 5th. Help us create a community-driven approach for smart reforms to lift the voices with those most at stake. Consistently in our history, those fighting for racial equity have fought for more, not less, community voice and control over our schools. So it's time to wage that fight again to ensure the voices of those most affected by our system are not silenced by its design. We hope you will be partners in this fight.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Mr. Stewart, would you mind turning up your microphone just slightly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, is that better? Yes, okay. Everyone tells me that, so I don't think it's the microphone, it's my voice. So I'm a librarian and I have a librarian voice, but so thank you so much. Justice Wednesday to you all. As a career librarian and library media specialist, I have found the field of library science to be a space where knowledge and advocacy help to serve populations small and large. As a public librarian, I started a father and son book club where we would sometimes have 15 young kings meet outside to read, eat pizza, and often have conversations that reached far beyond the text. How will we end gun violence? How will healthcare be made free to every person in the world? What systems will we put in place to make sure that poverty doesn't exist? These questions were questions that concerned their hearts and minds. Discovering solutions were even more important. Now, though this book club was founded pre-COVID, there was a freshness in speech, body, and mind that allowed them to be expressive in their articulations with no confinement or judgment. As I transitioned into school librarianship, I've had the immense pleasure of serving alongside the District of Columbia Public Schools. I noticed that several students desire to engage in outdoor learning. I had already begun a brunch on the streets years earlier, but students wanted to be a part of the book and food selection and also the community involvement. Once a month, we would set up a table with food, books, drinks, and flyers about upcoming school and library specific events. Community members from various backgrounds and experiences would help themselves to food, books, and great conversation. We were not only learning on the streets, but learning one another. This was a tremendous success with more students being engaged and community members looking forward to the brunch and book discussion. I found it imperative to explore even further this idea of learning outside the four walls of the school building. I designed field trips that would allow for us to explore the outside world. I selected some students who didn't have the highest grades. They thrived. Many of the written assignments after the field trip included a robust answer from them regarding a piece of artwork or something that they had considered that didn't cross their minds previously. Some field trips included the Glenstone Museum in Potomac, Maryland, with outdoor exhibits and feeding our homeless brothers and sisters in Washington, D.C., passing out food, books, hand and foot warmers, and learning about ending poverty and homelessness in our world, and specifically our nation's capital. I am excited to support the DC Coalition on Equitable Outdoor Education and this idea of thinking outside the box and exploring creative ways to engage our students. Mayor Bowser has issued Mayor's Orders 2020-103 to extend the district's public and health emergency until December 31st. This would be a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights, which outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, and sexual orientation and gender identity. I would have to say we can't discuss equality, equitable education, loving students, and providing them with the necessities of life without prudently dissecting our scientific reasoning and thoughtfulness. Compassion, love, justice, and peace shall prevail. Thank you and have a beautiful week.
Thank you so much. Ms. Raitt.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Suzanne Raitt and I am the mother of a DCPS student with a disability and an IEP. And I'm here to comment on the letter that the State Board sent to Mayor Bowser on November the 10th. I'm grateful for your advocacy for all of our children and for all DCPS families. And I'm here tonight to emphasize my agreement with two key points in your letter and to urge you to continue advocating to DCPS for a better coordinated strategy for reopening our schools and to move away from the model in which elementary care classrooms are staffed by adults who are drawn from other schools in the system. First, a coordinated strategy. Everyone's goal is to get our students back in school safely, starting with the most vulnerable students and the most vulnerable families. Like I imagine many of you, it was very disappointing to me that the initial plan for term 2 was characterized by a lack of collaboration and based on a survey of teachers that was later found to be in violation of city law. We need reliable data and input from all stakeholders as we continue to plan for in-person schooling. All stakeholders means students, as Mr. Boston said on the earlier panel, school counselors and psychologists, families, teachers, administrators, and staff. We as parents need to have confidence in DCPS's decision-making process. So do teachers, so do students. A coordinated and carefully managed strategy to establish benchmarks and procedures is going to be much better for everyone than a haphazard approach in which plans are walked back at the last minute, not because of the pandemic, but because of administrative and legal missteps. This coordinated strategy should allow individual schools to determine local reopening plans within a broader framework that's focused on system-wide safety and providing the best possible education to all children, especially those in need. The second point in your letter that I wanted to applaud is the idea that all of our children, whatever their age, are in this together. DCPS is a community. Students who are at risk are in all our schools, not just in our elementary schools. I therefore also endorse the suggestion in your letter that instead of asking middle and high schools to provide staffing for the care classrooms, DCPS pursues other avenues, including youth-serving nonprofits. Middle and high schools are open and their students are more in need of support than ever. Removing staff from those schools will inevitably result in decreased services and less educational opportunity for their students. No one wants to benefit one set of students through disadvantaging another. Thank you so much for your attention and for your advocacy on behalf of all DCPS families.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stamper.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Ms. Stamper, I believe we just lost you for a second. Are you with us?
Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Stamper, and I'm a resident of Ward 7 Deanwood neighborhood. I'm also an Empower Ed Ward 6 fellow. I'm an early childhood educator serving students and families in Ward 6. I'm also the parent of the Stamper boys. Imagine this, it's March 13, 2020, and schools are closing as a result of an airborne virus known as COVID-19. My oldest son is a kindergartner at Burroughs Elementary School in Ward 5. When the school closed, I felt immense pressure to become the principal, vice principal, behavior tech, custodian, secretary, business manager, and whatever else my children needed. I would jokingly tell my husband, we have to lesson plan for the Stamper Prep Academy, prep meals for the next few days. My husband looked me straight in my face. He said, babe, you just let me know where you want me to help. Since March 13th, 2020, my son, my oldest, has had a real fear of COVID. He has asthma. He quickly realized that hand washing was even more important. And my husband and I realized once schools were not opening for in-person learning that we needed to support our oldest son differently. Since March 2020, I've been teaching my students virtually. I've also had to care for my children, teach virtually, continue being a wife, being a mother, continue assisting neighbors with finding resources, and still just grasping this new educational reality. I realized the COVID-19 pandemic was influencing my children because my oldest son now needs glasses as a result of extended screen time. My kindergartner is learning different platforms now. His computer literacy has increased exponentially. My youngest child is receiving physical and speech services through DC Strong Start. On March 13, 2020, my youngest child wasn't walking yet, but now, deep into the pandemic, my youngest is walking, starting to use semi-understandable language. Progress. My main reason for my testimony tonight is to simply remind everyone listening to the sound of my voice is that we've made it this far by washing our hands, wearing our masks, social distancing, and following all the suggested CDC health guidelines. Guess what? We're still alive. Yet how we stay alive and stay safe is by continuing to practice good hand washing, wearing our masks, social distancing, and following suggested CDC health guidelines. Also, be kind to one another. Have empathy for your neighbor, your colleague, your friend, or your family member. Lastly, as a Black woman, I've always known my life mattered, and I'm thankful that now the rest of the world is finally realizing just how much my people have always mattered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stamper. Ms. Chapman.
Hi, everyone. Just want to, can you hear me? Okay, awesome. All right. Sorry, it was like the baby was supposed to go down and hold on. All right. So thank you so much for having me. I'm in a little bit of a rushed space. I apologize. I'm Richelle Chapman. I'm the current team lead for the Empower Ed Health, Safety, and Teacher Rights Subcommittee. On September 16th, 2020, I came before you to speak about the need for policies and protocols to protect charter school teachers because there is no formal manner in which to have a say in our safety and the conditions of our work. My aim is the same today because this circumstance persists. I spoke about being a pregnant teacher, coincidentally deciding to take my leave early as DC schools were closing last March. I also spoke about being a teacher intersecting with two vulnerable immunocompromised populations. I had my newborn son on the one hand and my senior mother in the house providing childcare. The decision of whether charter teachers would go back to school this past fall loomed over us, just like other charter teachers. We were just waiting to see what others with our fate in their hands would do. Today, we still wait. We still wait to see what DCPS does. We still wait to see how thoughtful and gracious our school directors will be in relation to our needs and concerns. And we still wait for our education leaders to acknowledge our voice and our need to be a part of conversations which determine the course of our lives. As we have seen in our government, a government for the people, which does not consider the people, leads to distrust and ineffective and insensitive policy. The fact that educational policy is being decided and implemented without the input of 43% of its constituents does not make sense. Both your mission statement and OSSE's mission statement include the tenets of shared responsibility and partnership to support DC students and families, and I am asking you to honor these tenets today. Charter teachers should have a voice at the table where conversations are happening and decisions are being made that affect their lives. This continues to be an issue. And so I challenge policymakers at every education agency to think about how they ensure that they hear from charter teachers before making policy, including at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, the State Board, and others, and think about whether a more formal space would help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, please do use the raise hand feature to let me know that you have questions. We will do a single round of 2 minutes each. Dr. O'Leary, you're up first.
Thank you. Your testimony, all of your testimony, were hitting the nail on the head completely. I just want to take a little bit of time to ask Mr. Stewart, because you can't go out, you can't go to these places. Have you thought about doing it virtually? And I just want to mention, I mean, I know I taught a thing, the things they carried by Tim O'Brien, and we went to the wall and we went, I'm a Vietnam vet, and we did all this other stuff. But if I were teaching it right now, then I would do it virtually. All right, that's just an idea. You don't have to answer it because I've got a couple of questions, but I really appreciate your testimony. The one thing that everyone keeps coming back to is like our raising our voices on the State Board of Education to try to change policies and try to do this. And I just want to mention to everyone that we weren't even asked to be a part of the Mayor's Reopen Committee. We didn't have a member on the Mayor's Reopen Committee, on the Education Committee at all. So I would just plead with all of you to go back into your communities and try to get the State Board of Education so that we have a voice to be able to make change in what's going on in the city. Because obviously, I think that Ms. Raitt mentioned haphazard planning. I would call that in my English class a euphemism. All right. So, and I'll stop right there.
Thank you. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for your testimony. I echo my colleague, Dr. O'Leary's sentiments. And thank you so much, Ms. Raitt, for reading our letter and also for pulling out important points. Thank you, Ms. Stamper, for the reminders, very important. But my questions are actually for Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Stewart. I'm very interested in both of you framed or talked about the connection between your focus and racial justice. So my question for you, Mr. Goldstein, is you mentioned a summit coming up. I'm wondering if racial justice is going to be one of the frames through which you'll be discussing this proposed change in how we govern our school system. And for Mr. Stewart, I'm interested in hearing more about your ideas between the connection between racial justice and outdoor learning. I think that's kind of what you were getting at. So why don't you go first, Mr. Stewart? You're muted.
Hello again. So as far as racial justice or racial injustice and outdoor education, for me, I'm actually the chair of the Equity Collaborative for the Washington Teachers Union, and we have made a point to make sure that we are including not only Ward 7 and 8, because we often hear Ward 7 and 8 when we're tackling issues of race, right? But if we are to do it accurately, then we have to look at all 8 wards and make sure that we're learning together. So as far as the book discussion, I do actually a book discussion online, but I also do it in front of schools. We did it last week in front of the William O. Lockridge Bellevue Library, where we gave out books, food, blankets, and we had that robust discussion. But I think the biggest thing is to make sure that we are looking at each individual school and accessing how they can have amazing books, amazing text, what type of books, and doing it in such a way that it's engaging and outdoor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parker.
Thanks, John Paul. I missed, admittedly, some of the testimony as I had to jump off the call and am rejoining, but from what I gathered, I would just encourage those that are testifying against the reopening of schools to continue to advocate and seek answers from the DC Department of Health. I say that because it has now been 3 times this week that I've heard the pivot from DCPS towards DC Health, and their response is when DC Health says it is not safe for us to resume schooling, we will not resume schooling. When asked what's the threshold that would make things unsafe, I have yet to get an answer. And so I think your advocacy is commendable. I think we need to get and seek more answers from DC Health. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then secondly, to borrow from the Ward 2 elect, I hope it's okay that I say this, incoming member Alistair Chang, regarding the governance structures here in DC, is about like, how do we frame the conversation around both equity, but also trust? And so I just offer that up as I thought it was both enlightening and intriguing. And it could be an opportunity to bring more people into the very necessary conversation around how we do school and governance here in DC. So no questions. I just wanted to throw that in there as I thought it might be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. President Wattenberg.
Thanks to everyone. I am going to start by focusing on Scott, and so far I haven't gotten to the second people, so we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to say, I think it's great that you're focusing on this issue of mayoral control and state board authority and how we create greater responsiveness. It's a great time to do it. I wanted to throw one extra idea into your mix, which I've been thinking about a lot, which is one thing that democratically elected school boards do is they help create consensus, because you have people there who represent people and they're from, you know, different parts of the city or different groups or whatever, and they have to kind of figure it out and thrash it out and figure out compromises and come up with consensus. And that is sort of the systemically how a board can work to both be responsive and to build the kind of consensus that we have not been able to see here. So I hope that becomes part of the what gets talked about. But I want on the outdoor education, we've had terrific conversation on it. And I'm thinking we should really have a formal panel on it next time. We had the doctor who talked about, I think, if you're outside, there's 1 in 4,000 chances of getting sick. That's really serious stuff to sort of think about how do we make that real. So my question to you, Mr. Goldstein, is the extent to which you think teachers are supportive of this, because there's some back and forth about, well, maybe not so much. And second, how, if there's time, never mind, just answer that.
Okay, so on teacher support, so we did do a representative poll of 400 teachers on this. Representative, I mean half public, half charter, all of the 8 wards and each grade level. And what we found in that poll is about 30% said they would be willing to teach outdoors from that representative sample. So that's a huge number of teachers. If we're not looking at it, sure, you could survey people and say 2 out of 3 didn't want to do it. But if 1/3 of teachers did that, that's a huge number of students that we could serve with this model. And that's what we found in WTU, who we talked to about this, has found similar things with willingness. So that's a huge number of people that could be served.
Thank you very much. Members, I don't see any additional hand. Oh, sorry, Mr. Batchelor.
Yes, sorry about that. I broke in kind of late right before President Wattenberg, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and just wanted to, I didn't have any questions either, but just wanted to acknowledge a theme that I think I've heard across all of your testimony tonight, which is equity, both not just in equity in education, but also equity in voice, right? Who has a seat at the table, who's a meaningful part of decision making. And I think on issues around reopening or around, teacher turnover, around which principals get fired and which stay, I think we've had prime examples over the years about how important that voice is. And I think that void in a platform for educators and for families and for students for sure has forced the state board to be a better representative body. And I want to thank you all for doing that on behalf of all of our residents. But as you can, I think as we're frustrated and you are, we also realize that has a ceiling, and that there's a lot more work we have to do to make sure that more of us have more meaningful access to shaping the educational experiences of our young people. And that for sure is paramount. And so I know that all of us are committed to doing that in many different ways, and look forward to working with you to expand that voice for all of us. And so we definitely have much more work to do, but I think the work that you've done already has made this body better, and I think is shifting the conversation around public education in this city in more ways than you might imagine. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batchelor. Members of the panel, thank you so much for being here tonight. We very much appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and logging off and watching the remainder of our meeting on YouTube. I will start letting the next panel in, but President Wattenberg, if you'd like to return to talk about the next panel discussion, I'll start letting folks in.
Great. And I want to say that our public witnesses are always terrific. I found this really great, the conversation around the outdoor education. The state board has long been interested in special education in the district. We are lucky to have the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education and the Office of the Student Advocate as part of our agency. And both offices provide very needed services, training, and information to the public. More information about their offices can be found on our website. And I encourage any parents having difficulties related to education, to special education, to reach out to the Ombudsman, the Student Advocate, or to the State Board for assistance. In May 2020, the State Board approved SR 20-8, a resolution in an effort to advocate for students with disabilities. We know that students with disabilities lag behind their peers in important metrics of academic growth. Only 2 out of every students with disabilities and 1 out of every students with a primary disability or specific learning disability. And and 1 out of every 20 students with disabilities who are at risk are classified as proficient on the PARCC. And the pandemic has only made things more difficult. We want to understand it better. We want to be in a better position to advocate, to understand what's needed, to understand what is being provided. And we have 6 witnesses tonight, so we will do a single panel. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to provide comments, and then we will have 2 rounds of questions from our state board members. So I'm going to, John Paul, you can do the introductions.
Madam President, I had them in your script, but I can introduce the panel if you'd like.
Okay. Or I can. So we have first Maria Blaeuer, Director of Program and Outreach at AJE, Advocates for Justice and Education. LaToria, I hope I'm saying that right, Eason-Brent, a parent. Erin McCormick, hi Erin, former Vice Chair of the State Advisory Panel on Special Education. Chioma Oruh, hope I pronounced it right, founder and principal consultant at Bornfree. Michelle Parrish, a fellow with the Parent Advocacy Action Team, and Yolanda also with the Parent Advocacy Action Team, I believe with that same organization. So thank you all very much for being with us. So I think, I'll let John Paul call people in order and he'll set up the timer. And in case you didn't hear it before, at the end of your 5 minutes, something will come up on your screen and you'll see that the time is running out and you'll know to sum up and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Ms. Blaeuer, feel free to begin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And thank you for the invitation. My name is Maria Blaeuer, and I'm Director of Programs and Outreach here at Advocates for Justice and Education. AJE is the federally designated Parent Training and Information Center for the District of Columbia. This means that it is our responsibility to provide free training, resources, individual assistance, and support to families and youth navigating the special education process. This panel tonight is filled with incredibly strong parent advocates who have real lived experience navigating special education during COVID-19. I encourage all of you to listen to them. They have a tremendous amount of wisdom to share. My comments tonight will be focused on what AJE has learned from the nearly 2,000 parents we have talked to in the last fiscal year. The parents we've spoken to have wide-ranging and diverse feelings about the return to school. Some want it to have happened yesterday, and others are comfortable waiting until school year 21-22 to even consider thinking about it. However, despite these differences, there are a few themes that have emerged from our conversations that we think it's important for you to be aware of. First, parents expect to be part of the conversation about reopening school. 2, parents expect to have options about the return to school, and they should not be punished for exercising any of the options that are made available to them. Parents expect timely, accurate information to support the decision-making around the return to school, and parents very much want school to be safe for their children and for their children's teachers. We've also heard many concerns from families about special education during distance learning. I'm going to share those with you tonight, and I'm also going to share some solutions we would like you to consider. First is very simple. Parents often do not feel heard and are not treated with respect and courtesy when they are interacting with their school. Parents are full members of their child's IEP team, and they are the only person on that team with a lifelong connection to the child. Despite this, we know that schools in DC are unilaterally determining what IEP implementation looks like during this time of distance learning. This is inappropriate. Technology, both access to working devices and access to the internet, remains an issue. In addition, many families are struggling to use that technology, and they need technical assistance and support. Parents right now, as I'm sure you know, are being asked to do more, and they're not getting the support they need to do more. Parent training and counseling, a federally recognized related service that is available to students with disabilities on their IEP is underutilized in DC, and both parents and LEAs are largely unaware of it. Many non-English speaking families are unable to access resources sent home to support their children because those resources are in English. This includes simple things like teacher bulletins. Parents have concerns about the effectiveness of the instruction and the services their children are provided via distance learning. Schools are unfortunately making referrals to MPD for truancy and other non-emergency matters. This is a matter of deep concern to us and many of the families we support. We are also concerned that transition activities, the activities that students leaving high school do in order to prepare them for adulthood, are unavailable during this time. We understand that evaluations, both initial evaluations and reevaluations, are being significantly delayed right now. And we are also deeply concerned that equitable services are no longer being provided at all to homeschooled children with disabilities. Now, these are children who are unaffiliated with any LEA in DC. Students with disabilities are disproportionately represented in this population, and DCPS has recently completely ceased to provide any equitable services to these students at all. They get nothing. And they've done this without any public comment or engagement or announcement. So in response to this list of concerns, we do have some things we'd like you to consider working with OSSI to explore some solutions. First, we'd ask you to encourage OSSI to support and train LEAs in IEP progress monitoring, compensatory education, parent engagement, how and when to engage with disengaged students and their families without involving MPD, and how to complete remote evaluations. We also encourage you to support OSSI in engaging with the Office for Human Rights and establishing guidelines that do not involve MPD for engaging with students who are truant or non-attendant. Finally, we ask you that you consider extending eligibility past age 22 for impacted students, grow this pool of providers for compensatory education and remediation, and finally, work to find a solution to ensure that eligible homeschooling students with disabilities are able to receive equitable services in DC again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Eason-Brent. Ma'am, I believe you're on mute.
Hello, how are you guys?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for being here. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, so for my experience thus far with my 10-year-old daughter who currently has articulation disorder, she is a 5th grader. She's had a lot of struggles starting off with this virtual learning because she's the type of student that needs extra assistance in the classroom. And for her to start off her year, she had a new teacher. The teacher was not aware that she had an IEP. The teacher had no knowledge of any of her history starting this school year. So it was very challenging for her the first 2 months of just kind of starting in a classroom where she wasn't comfortable. She didn't have that nurturing teacher. And for me, it's like, I'm juggling her, I'm juggling my other one, I'm juggling work. And, I'm a very hands-on mom. I work with my daughter nonstop. And I think, just seeing the classroom setting of a child that, needs extra assistance when it comes to ELA, and they're not getting that online virtually, it's kind of tough. But I think too, the schools being prepared to informing new teachers or teachers about each child's situation to better prepare them, that is something that, the teacher didn't find out till we had the parent-teacher conference that my daughter had an articulation disorder and that the history of her. So I educated the teacher about my daughter during our parent-teacher conference. So if you all recall, that parent-teacher conference was, I want to say, in October. So school had already been in for a while. And so everything started clicking, with the teacher once I stated that. So, and again, I'm a very hands-on mom. On the other hand, my daughter is excelling in math virtually. you know, considering her situation, like she needs to be redirected, she needs extra assistance. So for parents who don't have a voice or, you know, resources to navigate this process, it's hard, you know, and so many kids are falling behind virtually. So it's like there's no plan in place, there's no check-in. And you know, I'm personally more concerned about other children than my own child, because I know that at home I'm able to navigate and teach and excel her in those areas and sit with her in class and try to help her pronounce things. And you know, that started off where the teacher was like, oh, you need more time in your testing. And I had to let him know, like, yeah, if she was in a school setting, she would have that extra time to ask questions due to her articulation disorder. So I think, you know, my concern is just that we have to have some real plan in place for all of our students and what, you know, parents are able to cope with. And you know, some parents don't have the synergy to kind of work with their children or the means to do it right now. And you know, it's just very unfortunate to see how some kids are going to be behind 2 and 3 grades. So I'm just very concerned when it comes to special education, because our kids are already at risk, you know, and again, we know that in DC, there's about 11,000 IEP children on IEPs. So how are they really getting the services that they need? And I've talked to other parents. I know parents that have relocated out to other places and moved just to move their kids into different school districts to get more support. And that's not something, you know, it's just to hear the different stories. So that's all I have. I don't know how long I'm supposed to keep talking.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Brent. Mr. McCormick, good to see you again, sir. You're on mute, Mr. McCormick.
Good to see you again. It's been a long time. Good to see you, Ruth. It's been a long time. And a couple of other board members, Marcus and some other folks, and Karen, who is not present with you all. I echo what everybody has already said. They've said it all. The concern is there's a number of concerns. So one is that our school system was jumped into this right away. Nobody has the training to understand how to do remote teaching. But remote teaching falls under what comes under ESSA, which is called, universal design teaching. And if we were to follow, and what's so unique about the district is that in OSSI, under the direction of Dr. Mastera, who is now at DCPS, they started a division where they were teaching UDL, universal design teaching, to anybody who wanted it, to parents, to teachers, to administrators. It was on their calendar. And so at the time, they had a gentleman, Brandon Wallace, who was teaching it. And I'm not sure who's teaching it now. I know he left a couple of years ago. But this tool follows that of remote learning. And if all of our teachers and all our administrators had had that teaching that OSSI provided under the UDL, I think we would be better prepared where we are now. Again, I still echo all of what has been said. I think getting our kids in front of a monitor and not having that one-on-one touch of a teacher is very critical, especially for those who have services that are added to their IEP, or even their services that might be added to their 504. So again, I echo what everybody is saying. I'm not going to bring anything new in. AJE, who I know very well, I know her very well, has brought up the exact same things I would have noted. But again, how do we work with parents? I think one of the things that I'm hearing also is that our school coordinators are not getting the information to their teachers on who has an IEP, and that's concerning. And I've heard that numerous times. I'm not sure how we address that. I'm not sure if that's something that we need to talk to Dr. Mostera or Karen Larkin to reinforce that they're coordinators at all their schools. And and at the charter, that's a little harder because each charter has their own coordinators. But that's very concerning that students are going in classrooms where the teacher doesn't know that this particular child has an IEP. And that's very concerning. That puts that child behind, that puts that family behind. And one of the things that really needs to be echoed, and I know AJE is working on that, is that informing our community on their rights. Even in this COVID time, nothing stops. Matter of fact, the district provided by the feds is offering compensatory services. And I'm hoping that that information is getting out to parents, because right now that added service is being provided and you can ask for that. That's information that I'm hoping that the Ombudsman office is putting out, and that I know your student advocate is. I know him very well, but I'm not sure about your Ombudsman's office, what's going on there. So that's information that really needs to get out. And since we're in this digital inclusion age, that really needs to get out. I know I've been going to a lot of conferences online because I'm on the national level now, but text messages, Facebook, Instagram, whatever we need to use to get that information out has to occur. And then back to you, John.
Thank you very much. Dr. Oruh.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Great to see friends here. Love AJE. They are the voice of our families and a vehicle that we rely on, and everyone else that has spoken. My name is Chioma Oruh, and noting that starting in October this year, the Parent Advocacy Action Team, PAAT, a grassroots organizing body of District of Columbia Black parents of children with disabilities and special health care needs, in partnership with Bornfree, my consultancy company, and Bright Bean Network, a nonprofit organization, put out our first set of demands to Mayor Muriel Bowser and copied key educational leaders in her administration. Through our correspondence, we noted the dire consequence of not taking progressive steps to offering equitable services to District of Columbia students has put undue stress and unfair burdens on individual families to come up with their own solutions. This foundational failure impacts a wide range of our families, yet for vulnerable families, many of which are represented in PAAT, the impact of our city leaders in education not having a clear understanding of daily challenges we face represents a painful betrayal. Since our first correspondence in October, we have since held a town hall meeting with other special education families and advocates to revamp our demands, circulated a petition signed by over 150 impacted people, and held a demonstration at the Wilson Building to an empty audience as no one was in the house. While we deeply understand the need for in-person instruction, we remain dissatisfied with the method used by the various education agencies to address these issues which deeply impact us and DC families at large, especially other vulnerable families, including those experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, English language learners, low-income families, and students with various disabilities. For those of us that live with intersectional identities, it's painfully apparent our voices are not only ignored and silenced, they seem to be unwelcomed. Instead of responding to our reasonable demands, we have only seen an increase in disturbing practices. Today, I find the most pressing issue to address at this time is that of unqualified personnel in DCPS care classrooms. Not only is it unclear how students are found eligible for these classrooms, we find find it troubling that DCPS would roll out these classes starting this week after it made its decision to not formally reopen on the anticipated date of November 9th. There is a long history of trauma informing the targeting of experimental programming on the most vulnerable families. What this history has shown us is such groups are typically a target, not out of benevolence, but out of code calculations of the lack of agency they have. Such populations are not able to articulate disdain and take effective action against exploitation and violation. A clear demand that PAAT made, which would resolve a clearer solution than these care classrooms to Mayor Bowser, is to encourage DC education agencies to find ways to collaborate with healthcare agencies, especially the Department of Healthcare Finance, to find ways in which Medicaid eligible services for home and community services, such as personal care assistance, critical outpatient therapies, become avenues in which in-person education support can be offered to medically eligible families. As a member of the DC School-Based Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, led by the DC Department of Behavioral Health, I have the honor to serve in a process which already exists to facilitate school health services. I also serve on the Medical Care Advisory Council of the DC Department of Healthcare Finance. These ideas are achievable, and with commitment, they could manifest quickly to support families in dire need of in-person support, which does not look like the callous output of care classrooms, which, by the way, are staffed by unlicensed or people who are not actually experienced with caring for the high needs kids targeted for these classrooms. And Maria, you can correct me. We had a state complaint that spoke to exactly this problem of having unqualified staff caring for our kids. Even if they are getting on the computer, it is unacceptable that this would be the process and the solution that has no feedback from the families and they're rolling it out in real time. My colleague, one of our colleagues will not be joining us because, again, we are parents and we have real-time emergencies, and she will not be with us, but I'm going to turn it over to my other colleague, Richelle Parrish, who will speak on the attendance policies. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Ms. Parrish, please begin when you're ready.
Good evening. It's always so difficult to follow behind Dr. Oruh when she speaks. My name is Michelle Parrish, and I'd like to thank the Honorable State Board members for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am a third-generation Washingtonian, and I am currently residing in the wonderful Ward 5. I am a mother of 2 students in public school, one of which who does have special education requirements. And as Dr. Oruh stated, I am also a fellow with the Parent Action Advocacy team here based in Washington, D.C. Pre-COVID, special education families were already concerned about disparities in disciplinary practices, including existing exclusionary policies. Distance learning has presented some relief for families in that aspect of the daily stress associated with having a student in public special education or any form of special education. The return to school, however, amidst the current health crisis, presents new issues, mostly associated with the use of PPE and potential disciplinary or truancy actions related to that. Now, due to sensory processing issues, I can tell you for a fact that my son would not be able to maintain the use of a mask for an entire school day, nor would he be able to likely follow all rules associated with social distancing. I fear what will happen if he or any student like him violates any such rules of engagement. Will he be isolated? Will I be called? Will there be any form of trauma-informed curriculum ready to support him? As Dr. Oruh stated, in our demands to the mayor, we're looking for increased parent engagement, and that lack of parent engagement from special education families, as noted in that letter, leads me to believe that no one knows what we may need. I'd like to think that our voice matters, and myself specifically as a taxpaying third-generation Washingtonian, that it does matter. As we consider mulling over and we continue to think about how and when and if we reopen, we desperately believe spared voices need to be at the table. We continue to also be concerned about how truancy issues are impacting our specific students, their ability to access these online classrooms currently, and the way that their presence may or may not be appropriately documented, and the use of MPD to enforce those truancy policies continues to be a concern that we have specific to our families, and quite frankly, any family that may be facing challenges in the deployment of the online virtual learning environment right now. We do believe that the absence of our voices is a betrayal of our students and our families, and in reality, we do believe that our students' lives truly hang in the balance when these decisions are being considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists tonight. I really appreciate you being here. Members will be following the same protocols, so if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand in the chat, and then we will start from that. We will be having 2 rounds of questions for members, provided that there are questions for these panels. Dr. Sutter.
Did you call on me, John Paul? I lost audio for a second. Okay, thank you all to all of our panelists. My first question is to really anyone, but Dr. Oruh, it came up in my listening to your testimony as well as Ms. Parrish's. I've watched, part of my day job is education consulting, and I work with an organization that represents issues associated with special ed in charter schools, the National Center for Special Ed in Charter Schools. So I've seen how different schools and districts across the country are working to think about the needs of special students with disabilities and those who receive 504 plan services. One question I have is, as I've watched other districts do phasing in of learning in person, most of them started with students with disabilities and English language learners, and then moved to other support centers. DC has not. I'm wondering if in any of your work, my hunch is that it has to do with staffing, but I'm curious if you have heard anything else about why that is, that those students were not prioritized first.
Well, I'll just say that there's no real correspondence to families besides these surveys that DCPS sends out. Any request to have an interactive conversation to really understand their rationalization in any step that they've taken is unknown to me at this time. And I don't know if anyone else has more insight. And it would be unfortunate if you'd have to be an insider to have that kind of level of respect when our kids are our kids' lives are really on the line for all the reasons that Maria pointed out, right up to secondary transition. I think that it's a good plan if we were to phase it in different categories or different impacted communities. But at the same time, I still think that the risk is high. I'm concerned when you phase it out on very vulnerable people and you don't really have a means of ensuring that they're protected. There's no real say-so as to how they're going to roll it out. If they're going to reopen schools, they need to do it more democratically, more inclusive, and more family-centered, no matter what.
Thank you. I'll yield back my time.
Thank you. Dr. O'Leary.
I just wrote something down, and it is how I feel. I thought your testimony was, well, this is what I wrote. The testimony at our meeting tonight is frightening. The lack of coordination and planning is catastrophic. That's how I feel every day. My daughter had a 504 when she was in school, and there were a lot of people that didn't act on it. I taught at Cardozo where if we had 750 students, we had at least 250 students that had IEPs of 504s. And the fact that this, the lack of planning, I wouldn't even call it planning, it's less than that. And it's been 8 months now since the schools were closed. And the conversation we're having right now is the same conversation we had in our April State Board of Education meeting. So it's up to the community. Your testimony was fabulously informative. I won't say it was positive because there's nothing positive that's happening with students who have special needs, who are our most needy students. And someone needs to be accountable for that. Unfortunately, it's not us yet on the State Board of Education. but I know that I am going to spend my next 4 years raising my voice to try to get somebody to listen. And please continue to come, because this is the only forum that is open to the public and that happens every month, where people can come and provide the community with information. I appreciate, I'd love to ask you questions, but you're just going to give me the answers that I'm asking for. And I know what the answers are, and so do you. But we need to make sure that the public knows that, and especially that our leaders know the urgency that needs to be put on this horrible situation for our most needy children and their parents and their teachers and their principals and the other people that work with them. I'll yield.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary.
Thank you.
Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you all for your testimony, and I echo my colleagues' comments. And I guess I will just also acknowledge and reiterate that it's mystifying, really. Ms. Oruh, you mentioned that parents haven't been engaged, but neither have the professionals like you, right? You're both a professional and in this field, and a parent. So it's just, yeah, it's mystifying. I don't understand it. And it brings up sort of the point that's been made that we need a shift in how our system is governed. And I think, as with so many things, the pandemic has only highlighted what was already there, right? It's made it more apparent. I do have a very specific question actually for Ms. Blaeuer. You mentioned transition services not being available, and I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about that, what those transition services are.
Certainly. So it can be things ranging from social skill work to specific job skill work, depending on the level of need for the student. It can be social skills. It can be, and there are some transition services that are happening, and some LEAs are making real efforts there. But for a lot of our kids, those services are not effective, and they don't align well with their long-term career plan. And one thing that we're really asking OSCE and LEAs to think about is extending eligibility under IDEA for an extra year or even more, because we know, especially during that critical time, a lot of our kids aren't getting what they need to be ready. And that's a number that the federal government measures. That's indicator 14. DC has some of the worst performance in the country on indicator 14. An extra year of eligibility could make a big difference there.
Thank you. Do I have other questions? I feel like I do. Oh, yes, Ms. Oruh, you mentioned that you, and I think I know what this is, but I think it would be good for you to talk about it, is there are processes that you're already engaged in that already are effective. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, as mentioned in my testimony, a clear demand is to investigate, no matter what placement, as in it could be home-based, it could be center-based, it could be school-based, that students are able to receive qualified support. Even our dedicated age structure is defunct. It could be resolved in any case with greater partnerships with the healthcare sectors. I also endorse a lot of what Ms. Blaeuer, Maria had said about MPD imposition and speaking to resolving questions that really could be engagement, which is an ESSA requirement. These things are not happening, and they're foundational, and there are other levels and measures that should and must be taken, but they have to be family-centered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, President Wattenberg, I see your hand. I just want to make sure that other members have an opportunity to ask in first round before President Wattenberg. President Wattenberg, go ahead.
Thank you. This was so informative from all of you. Thank you so much for coming. My questions in this round are all for Maria. And I just want to ask you about some very specific things that you said and ask you why you think they're happening. One is that decisions on IEP implementation were violated, evaluations were delayed. Let's start with those two. So my question is, why? What is it about this situation that caused that? Is it, for example, is it just people couldn't figure out how to implement the IEPs, for example, and so the decisions were violated? The evaluations, is it, can they not be done electronically well? So people are putting them off. What is at least what's your sense of the reasoning on it? And also, are the decisions, in your sense, more school level decisions or central level decisions?
Well, like everything else, COVID has kind of exacerbated existing problems. So while the law requires that parents be central members and full members of the IEP team, that's been a problem for a long time. And COVID has made that worse. So we really see this in two ways. We see one in problems around disagreement around what implementation of the agreed to IEP looks like now. So that is one thing. And that is, I think, a problem that comes from, one, a lack of resource, a lack of willingness, a lack of candidly, not a lot of options, and a lack of creativity around some of what that might look like. And then there's also disagreements about what the IEP itself should be right now. And again, I think the problems there are not unique to COVID. Those are long-standing pre-existing problems. And one of our recommendations was that there be more support for how to engage and work with families. I think that's incredibly important. Teachers get training from OSCEs on all kinds of things. One of the trainings they should get, and an appropriate role for the state agency to play, is to support LEAs in having more productive and positive relations with families. And I think that's one thing there. Regarding the evaluations, there's a couple of different things happening there. Some evaluations are happening, some aren't. It's really, I think, a question of a lack of training and a lack of flexibility and conversation with families. I think conversation would make a big difference there. And I think that some of the previous comments about the timelines not being waived, that continues to be true. These evaluations should be happening on time.
Thank you very much. Members, will now move to our second round of questions. If you do have a question for the second round, please use the raise your hand feature, and I'll call on you in the order that folks put their hands up. Okay, seeing no questions. Oh, hold on.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Hayworth. I saw Mr. McCormick had something to say, so I could give him a little time if he wanted to say something.
Sure. Mr. McCormick, you have up to 3 minutes.
To echo off what Maria said, is that one, parents need to get their, well, Maria and them and AJE, I'm hoping that, like I indicated, that the compensatory is available for education and services. It is there. The feds mandated it because of the COVID. So the services are there. The issue is, do parents know that it's there? Parents do not know that it's there. And then you have Maria AJE, who's one person who is trying to get that information out to 12,000 participants who have been identified with an IEP. So one is getting the information out. The other thing is the feds gave a waiver on reviewing IEPs. So due to this COVID, it was a waiver came out. Well, you don't have to do all your IEPs if that annual, you only had to do, I forget what the percentage was. And I know this came up at one of our meetings from OSCE back in June. And so there was a big waiver that was given out to our LEAs on how many IEPs would be reviewed. But parents need to know, even though their IEP may not be reviewed, it's still in play. Nothing changes. nothing at all changes. And parents need to understand that. And being in this COVID time, it's even more difficult of getting that information out.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. Sorry, I went to get myself an apple. So my question is, going back to the conversation Dr. Oruh offered in response to my question, this piece around still having concerns about sending families, sending children, vulnerable children especially, back into buildings. Are there ways that you've seen either others provide services or that you would like to see services provided that might not require physical presence in a school building?
Yeah, again, just to reiterate, I think an underexplored avenue here is looking at how home care services currently exist for people with disabilities and senior care. That structure, and by the way, home and hospital care is not unknown to education agencies that implement IEPs. These are things that are known. The question is, can you widen the eligibility for similar services that can support? Distance learning is not a solution for our families. So it's not as simple as saying, don't reopen schools and then just rely on distance learning. That's really not an option. So a third way for us is to really have some level of related services that can come in the home. So it's not limited to just unskilled PCAs, which can be trained through in-service, can be trained through education and through healthcare structures. They're used to receiving trainings, they're used to receiving these mandates. If you make an educational plan for them to support families that are on their roster, or even make new families more eligible who receive any of the Medicaid or Medicaid waiver. Medicaid for our families is not just income-based. There's the Katie Beckett program. So it really has a wide reach in what it can do. We are already doing that, as I mentioned before, with the school behavioral health being a key avenue. I could say for my sons, one does okay on distance learning. I still have to supervise, but my younger son is completely adverse. I literally can do nothing but sit there and cry with him while he's being tortured in a process that he cannot understand, cannot receive, because he has autism and he's semi-verbal, highly intelligent, but not able to access the curriculum through distance learning. There have to be better ways. So we should visit in-person options. And that can look like these outdoor centers that have been talked about earlier, but it's to have the qualified staff who are trained and constantly invested in to be able to support our kids no matter the placement.
I appreciate that. Quickly, is there a technical solution that, like, does OSSI need to expand the eligibility for those kinds of positions to happen?
OSSI would have to step in terms of setting the state standards, but also at the LEA levels, the LEAs have a lot of leeway in who they do business with, who they can partner with. They're the ones who go into MOU contracts with a wide range of people. They could partner with a number of already existing home care services, and OSSI can help in training and creating standards of what those partnerships could look like, similar to what we're doing with the school behavioral health process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I don't see any additional questions. I know President Wattenberg has some. I just wanted to make sure that no one else has additional questions before President Wattenberg wraps us up. Go ahead, President Wattenberg.
I actually want to follow up on that last round of questions. Ms. Oruh, can you help us or me and people who are listening understand very concretely what the kinds of services are that could be provided through the healthcare services that you're talking about? Which students with what disabilities, and what's the support?
Yeah, I mean, eligibility is set at the state level, so that's a very nuanced question that would have to be determined on a case-by-case basis in terms of Medicaid eligibility. DC uses SSI to determine waiver eligibility for other services that you would get on your IEP, like speech, like speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA, applied behavioral analysis therapy, a wide range, assistive technology. Right now, DCPS has 2 people. I don't even know if they're working right now in terms of making accessible distance learning in ways that, just sending a laptop is not a solution for a lot of our kids. They have to be other inventive technologies to make it accessible for executive functioning and other tools. Now, also for the unskilled workers, the PCAs, they are more qualified than the dedicated aides. I mean, these are people who are trained to assist with activities of daily living, to help support independence in making and doing your tasks. Now, that is what a dedicated aide should do. But we know through a current lawsuit that's out here, that's not happening. They're actually abusing the kids. Not saying that this doesn't happen in the healthcare space, but there is more investment in their training and their ability to support our kids to be independent and to access things they wouldn't otherwise do that is not available at this time. And there seems to be no intelligence to explore such avenues for our families.
So to just take one very specific example, so take this speech therapy. So if I'm hearing you right, it's that is something that would be much better provided in person than over distance. And, or am I picking a bad example? Or maybe the daily living, that's something that really isn't well provided on the virtual, but could be provided in person much better. And so the idea would be that through these services, somebody would come to the house and provide the service, that the training, the support that otherwise would have been provided presumably on a largely one-on-one basis if they were in school. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, even in the healthcare, telehealth is an option, right? Like some kids can be served for all these therapies via telehealth, but a segment of the population cannot access through these mechanisms. And that seems to be missing. And sending them into these non-PPE spaces that are, hotbeds for COVID is not a solution. So bring people into the home like they are now. My kids are receiving PCA services right now. They're receiving therapies right now. And people do come into the home right now. Can they be trained to support them educationally, which is a missing gap and link?
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
I just have one question for anyone on the panel. What is the percentage of people that you know about that don't have access to a computer in this virtual learning that we're doing? Does anyone have any kind of feel for that? Because I know that, we're talking about a situation that's really exacerbated by needs. But if you don't even have a computer to work with, does everyone have one to work with that you have been talking to with the clients that you have?
So, can I jump in?
Real quick, and then I'll pass it over. I've been speaking a lot. But last numbers I checked, it was 40% of DC families are not having distance learning. They've made some improvements. Maybe it's come down a notch, but it's about 40%.
40% of the families don't have computers?
Yeah, that's the last numbers I saw. I can source find it and send it to you later.
Yeah. And I would add on top of that, this week I'm doing the numbers for our federal reporting, which is why I knew we talked to over 2,000 families this last fiscal year. Access to the internet, access to enough bandwidth, and access to working computers are some of the most common calls we've gotten in the last 6 months. So I would urge you, whenever you look at any numbers around this, to be skeptical. We get a lot of calls about families whose computers don't work, haven't worked, can't get it to work, and families where they don't have adequate bandwidth. So I think the question is not just, do you have a computer? It's, do you have a fully functional computer and do you know how to use it?
Right on, Maria.
The reason I asked that question is that it seems to me that all that the LEAs are doing are sending surveys on the computer.
Yes.
Okay, but that, if I don't have a computer, I'm not getting a survey, so you don't get my answers. And we've been talking about this since April. And if it's 40% is mind boggling.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to be out of a job because of that.
So I can't speak to that 40% number, but I can tell you that when we send out information, almost 50% of the newsletters we send to families are viewed on mobile devices. And when I'm talking to families, a lot of kids are accessing their learning through their mom's mobile device. I will be quiet and let somebody else take the last couple seconds.
Yeah, I'll just add in just saying that, yeah, there is the computer literacy. There is just literacy. How many families have low literacy? If you're sending information through text, if you're sending it in English, if there's no translating, there's no human contact. If you're using Microsoft Teams only, which is, I just really have a personal gripe against Microsoft Teams is the only platform in which DCPS uses, and it's not always accessible. You can't call in on the phone. So there are all these issues that are related to like technology in addition to internet access. I think it was 40% not having internet access, maybe not devices, but again, I'll find the sites that I wrote a paper that's in the Hechinger report on this 40% number. I'll find some of the citations and send it to you all.
But if it's 10%, that's extremely high anyway, because everyone was promised that they would have a working computer.
I want to
Thank
say,
you.
as a parent and active in my daughter's school, I know that the PTA, we made it like there was a point that people did the surveys, and what they learned in conversations as well, a lot of parents did not provide the correct phone numbers or email addresses to the school. So they were unable to get a school issued computer, or they're unable to contact the families. So that's why another reason why a lot of families don't have access, because when they're registering or the phone numbers were, I don't know, like a monthly phone, and the phones are cut off. So that has been a lot of problems as well too. But I do know that like my daughters, they went above and beyond making sure that the surveys were filled out, that people had technology, providing information about, I want to say Comcast, or if you did not have technology at home. But a problem is a lot of people did not provide the correct information too. So it's a multi thing of what I'm seeing that's affecting virtual learning. We don't have the right phone numbers to contact this family. We don't know what's going on with, the access with the kids, or the dad has a phone while they're working. Because I've seen situations in one of my younger kids, and she's in a bilingual program, where, they have to share a phone, or just different situations, or having the person that speaks English to be present. So I think it's just making sure that as we have a collaborative plan moving forward, because there has been some good things done, that as we move forward over the next few months, that we figure out the gaps to really support and get our kids what we need, because I know as a parent, it's very pivotal right now, because our kids, are not, they're at the helms of being held back. And I mean, not every kid has a parent at home that's trying to read to them that they can do Zern. So we just have to come up with a collaborative solution as a city and say, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to support each other. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Panelists, on behalf of the State Board, thank you again so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate your engagement with us, and please do feel free to come back anytime. We have, as one of our representatives mentioned earlier, we have an open forum every month, usually on the third Wednesday of every month, and anyone who wants to come and speak has up to 3 minutes to speak. So feel free to shoot me an email, and we will certainly put you on that list as well. Madam President, I will go ahead and dismiss this panel and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. It was terrific. Well, I think board members will be interested to know and excited to know that unlike the past 4, 5, or 6, or 7 meetings, we don't have any further business tonight. We are ready to hear new business, and I believe we do have some from social studies. And if others have new business they want to raise, we are here with all of our energy to hear it, but that's all we got. So let me recognize Ms. Sutter.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So my item of new business relates to the guiding principles from the Social Studies Standards Advisory Committee. The SISAC has one meeting remaining in December where it will finalize its guiding principles before presenting them to the state board for approval and forwarding on to OSSE so that their writing committee has guidance. Before we do that, the SISAC and the State Board Social Studies Committee wanted to give the public a chance to weigh in on the guiding principles. And so beginning on Friday, November 20th, for a period of 10 days, the State Board will release the guiding principle final draft from the SISAC for public comment. I ask that my colleagues, when we get that link out to all of you via our press release, help distribute that. We'll make sure it gets out to the State Board's wide network, including schools, ANCs, ward education councils, but we ask that you amplify it as well, because we really do want to make sure that this public process we've engaged in so far is as accessible as possible to anybody who wants to give us feedback on the guiding principles we've created, so that we can incorporate that into our discussion. Any questions about the time period? Again, it's November 20th to the 30th. It'll stay open over the Thanksgiving holiday, since so many of us are not traveling and staying home and masking up and keeping our distance. We'll have plenty of time to provide public comment on the social studies guiding principles.
Very good. Thank you. Any other?
Thank you.
I do.
Dr. O'Leary, and then Mr. O'Sullivan and Ms. Gasoi.
This is sort of new old business. I just want to mention about the attendance policies that are in place right now. The attendance policies for students are that if they sign on to Canvas before 11:59, they are guaranteed to have attendance for that day. That they do not take attendance in Microsoft Teams. So theoretically, a student could have perfect attendance and get all zeros in his or her class. I just want you to, that's the district policy. The local schools can have their own policies, but that's the policy for attendance. The other thing is the care classroom started today. And I think for my colleagues, you probably want to check in with your schools and see how they went, because they didn't go well. And they didn't go well because the principals didn't even get the people who were going to be supervising the care classrooms names until yesterday, and some of them weren't there today. So some of the schools had to cut back on their classrooms after they informed the parents on Monday that their students were going to be in a care classroom. And then yesterday they had to get back with the parents and tell them that they would have to cancel the classrooms. I guess that is new business, because everything is in such a state of flux that every week is new business as far as what's supposed to be happening.
Thank you. Who did I say was next? Mr. O'Sullivan or?
Yeah. So thank you, Ruth. We have the Student Advisory Committee is hosting an event on December 1st, Tuesday, December 1st. And basically it will be like about distance learning. So all of you all are invited. I'm not sure if the social media team on the state board has started putting it out on social medias, but you guys will all get the flyer and the information. It's going to have student panelists from the Student Advisory Committee, and we're going to talk about topics such as asynchronous versus synchronous balance. I think also the attendance policies, and then some of the other sentiments you all have heard from students that have testified in myself and Shayla. It will be a Zoom event. It'll be virtual. I think I want to say 6:30. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. You all will get that information. So that'll be Tuesday, December 1st. So hopefully all of you guys can attend that.
And Alex, just to be clear to the viewers out there as much as us, this will be, will other people be able to call in, or it's we're going to hear you guys talking about it both?
Yeah, so Shayla and I will be moderating it, and there will be students from, I don't know how many high schools, but there's a good variety of high schools in DC, and then you all will be able to also have Q&A as well, so you guys can write questions in the chat. I think it will be set up as a webinar just for like Zoom security. So you all will be seeing us, but you can still call in and hear what we have to say as well.
Great. I look forward to it. All right, Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. So I just wanted to mention that the Well-Rounded Education webinar focused on reopening schools has a date. It's December 10th. So please save the date, December 10th at 3:30. And I believe the flyer for that will come out in English and Spanish Friday. So hopefully you can all help with the outreach. As I mentioned, I think at our working meeting, the last webinar went great. And I think the biggest flaw was just we didn't have enough folks tuning in who weren't already in our orbit. So I really hope to do a better job on the outreach this time around. So that's it.
All right. Anything else? Going once, twice. Thank you, everybody. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. With that, we are now adjourned. Thank you guys very much, and see you. Have a great, happy Thanksgiving, and to all the people watching as well, and see you all after the holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.